Nice. Just on time, right? That's exactly how that works.
Yep, pretty much.
So I've been playing Chris with a little bit of things on my mind, and it turns out the more I've surveyed both the team, our partner base, customer base, and just general practitioners, the scariest thing this Halloween is the people.
Yeah, yeah. Welcome to a Halloween edition of the Product Lab. Um, we didn't plan this. We wish we would have thought far enough ahead to plan this.
I
But here
am
we are.
glad that it kind of landed on Halloween though, because it turned out pretty okay.
Yeah, yeah. I think we'll have some interesting stuff today. I think we got a good story to tell, but I don't know. You doing anything crazy today?
I will tell you. So I'm on the West Coast today, and the weather here is like 46 degrees and rainy here
Ooh.
in Portland,
Oh
Oregon.
no.
So Portland, Halloween's here in the U.S. just hit different. By that I mean chilly cold. I'm super curious with folks that are watching and joining. Any amazing plans for that, or you just choose not to, you know, worship the scary spirits? Everything else, yeah, sounds like great weather to drink bourbon. I 100% agree.
What's Halloween like in the southern hemisphere? Is it like warm?
Ooh, I never thought about that. Does it overlap? You know how like US Thanksgiving isn't the same thing as Canadian Thanksgiving? They're on different
Yeah,
dates.
yeah.
All right. So Philadelphia talking about candy melting tonight in 78 degree, 80s in Georgia. I am jealous as hell.
Oh, 80s. Nice. Sweet. All right.
Well, I'm ready to kick off. I've got some
Let's
stuff
get
to
it going.
share now that we got a chance that the chat is going. I think everybody in tech has said the back end is working just fine. I'm going to go ahead and jump to some previews. Chris, you okay with that?
Yep, let's do it.
All right. So I put together this beautiful human spook the shiz out of us that seems about apropos. With that said, I'm still looking at chat and it's lightening up. I see 35 in Calgary, and unfortunately, I'm pretty certain that's Fahrenheit, and that sounds terribly cold. 35 Celsius would be terribly warm. So I guess no matter what, Jeremy,
Yeah.
you're losing here in Calgary. Keeping it going, Chris. I've got some topics, right? So we know we always jump into what new cool products we've shipped or new cool features and things. A lot of this, by the way, if you're joining us at Product Lab for the very first time, this is where we want your feedback. We want to know what's on your mind. We want to know what's causing you trouble. More importantly, we want to be able to take feedback that we can actually quickly turn into new features, new functionality, new products. So you hear us talking a lot about that. But I've teed us up with a kind of trifecta here: the love-hate relationship with end users, kind of walking through a little bit of a historic timeline. I've got the rise of, I don't know, HPI. It sounds like a combination between like human preventable disease, it just doesn't sound great, but human preventable incidents is what I've teed up here for us. And then again, kind of the future of defense, what we can do beyond just some of the normal shenanigans. You
Yeah.
okay with those topics? Because I've got
Yeah.
some that are interlaced. I saw your updates throughout, when we were building some of this morning.
Yeah. I think the
Overall,
only thing I wanted to share was, for folks who haven't been here, who this is your first time, maybe you're seeing this on YouTube, maybe you're seeing this on LinkedIn. So we are live on YouTube and LinkedIn today as well. Product Lab is really kind of a show where we kind of give you a look behind the scenes, where we show you what's going on. We talk about what's new, what are we shipping. We also like to talk about what are we learning and some of the direction of where we're going. So we kind of sprinkle all this in. Today's episode is kind of about like where are we going? Where do we think things are going, and specifically users and how we protect users.
so Chris, I've playing around with straight out of the lab. Obviously, the stuff that we ship isn't always about users per se, but it's usually about user experience. Going back in, and again, I'm going to try not to kill us with too much death by PowerPoint here because nobody wants to hear PowerPoint. But users are a theme that happens to be running through most of the stuff we're shipping. So if you take a look here, unwanted access, really on the identity side, pretty excited. Looks like 10,000 kind of user and identity related incidents. We just hit that big milestone. If you think about that, that's 10,000 less chances of wire fraud, 10,000 less chances of folks being able to get into your email and then forwarding out mass spam or spreading malware, spreading campaigns. I love the fact that the team is just calling out flat out, like, not perfect, but really reducing both the overall pain that a lot of people are facing for Microsoft 365 related attacks on identity, also reducing the things that we miss as that product continues to mature. So I'm pretty stoked to be able to see, like, look, over 3,000 is the total number there. And they've actually rolled out unwanted access. So the biggest thing is with unwanted access, it's kind of the modern version of what I would call, what most people in IT and security would call impossible travel. Turns out impossible travel is largely bullshit when everybody logs in with a VPN into your country or into your local region that you've geofenced. So we really had to reinvent a lot of things that kind of were based on thoughts of yesterday. So, Chris, if you haven't seen it, they're continuing to expand, not just on what happens on M365, but really moving towards the Entra apps. I think they're calling this rogue apps these days. So pretty exciting to see what's happening, especially on some of these legitimate apps that are used for like backup, cloning, or mail forwarding, that hackers aren't installing their own custom shady app. They're installing legitimate, signed, published apps, and then using them kind of like lull bins on the endpoints or living off the land binary. So pretty excited.
Yeah. And this one's a big one. If you weren't here last month, when we talked about this last month, the number of incident reports we had sent based on unwanted access was only like 4,300 or something. So in 1 month, we more than doubled that. So we're having pretty good success there. Still keeping that false positive rate low. We don't want to send anybody stuff that's like creates extra work for them. So I think overall, really big win here.
So, Chris, some folks in the chat were just talking about, aware of some of the things that are coming along. We know Matt Kiley, right? Great researcher, teaches all kinds of malware classes online, etc. He's the product researcher for this ITDR product we have. I've heard rumor that there's going to be opportunity even in rogue applications to bring more like private and public beta chances. So for those of you asking, I know Bruce chimed up in chat, but those of you interested in that type of stuff, like please, please, please hassle your account managers. It's always a good chance. Like we always take for people who like opt in first, and usually Product Lab is the very first time anybody gets the opportunity to say like, yo, heard this is coming, want to be a part of it. So please, please, please reach on out that way. With that said, Chris, this is another user-facing thing. You want to talk a little bit about, because you and I have this love-hate relationship with tamper protection. We know from hackers, like if I have admin privileges, I can escalate, put all the different kernel mechanisms you want on me. I'm going to tamper with the ioctls. I'm going to abuse your application. I'm going to make your EDR or your antivirus turn off if I have admin privileges.
Yes.
But let's be real. Sometimes, I know privilege access management is a thing. We've been talking about it for like 100 years. Sometimes end users need admin rights. And so do you want to walk through a little bit of what the team's doing? You actually got to see the offensive write-up on what the team did for this. So can you break it down?
Yeah. So one of the biggest asks for a while now for EDR was, hey, my users are able to disable Huntress, or any basic attacker could disable Huntress, and that was true for a long time. And we didn't really see it too much. We'd see it maybe pretty rarely. A user would actually disable it, or even more rarely an attacker. But as we started to gain ground, we started to get some attention from attackers. So we had to do something. Obviously, like Kyle said, we know we can't be perfect, but the main goal was like, how can we prevent users who have admin privileges or just basic attackers from stopping Huntress? So we actually went in and we wrote up a bunch of like offensive attacks. Like, here's what we could do from an offensive perspective, and we kind of red team this. And so you can see the list here of like, users can't stop the services or kill the processes or inject into the updater. They can't write to the directory or registry keys. They can't uninstall using the uninstaller or add remove programs. But we also made this really easy. So there's two ways that you can kind of disable tamper protection. One is that you can uninstall just directly from the Huntress UI, right? You can go in there and say uninstall this agent. If you wanted to uninstall a bunch of them, you can actually go in and say, hey, disable tamper protection for this organization. That will turn it off, and then you could use your RMM to actually go and uninstall from tens or hundreds of machines. So we tried to give kind of the best of both worlds. But as the slide said, this is not perfect prevention. As soon as we put this out there, somebody will come out and there will be a post to Reddit later this afternoon that says, I bypassed Huntress's EDR tamper protection. And like,
of course you did. Of course.
We know. We're just trying to make it so like users can't just say, well, I'm annoyed with this Huntress thing and get rid of it. Right.
And let's be real, like that is a real problem. Like, we'll talk about it a little bit later, but believe it or not, one of the funniest things that we get on the security awareness side of the house is angry end users, not just like, our partners and customers, but people who were, for instance, that fell victim to DD's phishing, who are ticked off like, you got me. And then they come and yell and they get angry. And they, the long story short that we're sharing here is like, none of this stuff is perfect. We are iterating through, but more importantly, at the end of the day, sometimes the end users are the most nefarious there. And we've heard that sentiment so much so as we move through some of these updates, we're going to tell you what we've heard from you and then share with you what we think we're doing. And the reason I say think is we're going to need your feedback here in just a second. Chris, one of the things I'm excited is the new learner experience. Some of these awareness board leaderboards, trying to be able to change just the overall dynamic. You're not getting punished when you're doing something negative, like for instance, accidentally falling for phishing. So excited to see that's out of beta and into GA. A whole bunch of you chimed in from our, I think 2 episodes ago at Product Lab. So huge thanks on the continued feedback. Like we actually read and we actually make adjustments. So half of you in here, like for instance, Drew was just making a suggestion for people to go upvote. Really, really appreciate that. And then Chris, Managed SIM is kind of your baby. We're still maturing. We're still growing. You want to walk through real quick before we kick off this episode of what happened with SIM? Because after we pass this part, I think it's all day users being spooky Halloween stuff.
Yep. So wanted to call out a couple of things here in terms of some new data sources, Palo Alto firewalls, Sophos, and Ubiquity. We got better support for Meraki logs. So we were parsing Meraki stuff before, but there were some things we weren't parsing. So we improved on that. There are now example queries, or what we call canned queries. So you can just go in there and say you wanted to run a query to see all the users who have failed authenticating in the last 24 hours. That's in there now. Monthly and quarterly reports, we're getting closer. You can see an example on the right. So this will be the type of report that we will be generating for you to just really show you like how many events are coming in, how many have been investigated, how many resulted in incident reports. And we are nearing completion of exporting search results. So when you go into the dashboard, you run a search. We will now give you the ability, it's not live yet, but you'll have the ability to then export that to like a CSV so you could do something else with it. And then here at the bottom, there's some metrics just to show you how this continues to grow. Number of data sources reporting to us is getting closer to 1 million, and we continue to grow in the volume of data ingested.
Hey, Chris, Tyler's starting to steal some of your thunder. He said in chat, how soon will you begin detecting and alerting via the SIM? I know you got a screenshot or two in here later as we're talking about pesky users. Again, not beating up on them, but the reality of if we want to enable productivity, you have to allow users to be able to do stuff. And so do you want to steal that now or do you want to wait? Because I do know you have some slides.
Well, I'll give, I think there's 2 things. I'll give the one. So one of the things that we have started to do, and I want to be very clear and caveat this, that this is still early. It's R&D. We are iterating on it. But we have had some success recently detecting malicious actors RDPing into machines looking at SIM logs. So we've got some detections there. We've sent some incident reports based on it. It's not perfect yet. We're continuing to add more detectors. And then I'll show you a little bit behind the scenes later in these slides.
Sweet. Okay. Well, I won't kidnap because I know, like you said, you have some of these. But Chris, I really was exploring this because a lot of our feedback we get tends to be, I'm in this business to enable businesses to be productive. I don't care if you're an in-house IT department or some form of like outsourced MSSP, MSP, telco, printer copier dealer. We work with them all at the end of the day. And I'm calling a love-hate relationship. And my first example I ever heard of was PEBCAC, right? That's that problem exists between keyboard and chair. I think everybody in chat has probably heard this one before if you've spent like one day on the help desk. With my first job in the military, not being the cool, sexy, intelligent stuff, it actually was help desk before I went network engineering, before I went to the offensive side. This thing like resonated with me. I get the adversarial relation sometimes with end users. And so I did a little bit of history lesson just to keep this entertaining. Does anybody want to guess where this is rumored to have come from, where PEBCAC comes from? And I'll tell you, the internet is like wishy-washy. We probably need a Snopes article for this or something like that. While we wait to see if we get anybody playing here. And I do appreciate folks calling out where the actual, comment came from. It looks like a lot of kind of these names started with the early 70s era IBM team, people who were truly handling real, first iterations of error between keyboard and chair. And so we kept looking, by the way, so this is a 2 years old, but we wanted to ask the question of, Reddit's still feeling this way. Do we call them users? Do we call them people? So I'm curious, just to get a little bit of the juices flowing. Like, what term do you use and refer to your users, and why? Like, I'd like to hear some of this. And I will warn you that if you're debating between, do we call them users or do we call them people? If your answer is those are interchangeable, except users who don't really qualify as people, you are indeed cynical. Okay, who if Net Nanny is joining us or Not Your Nanny is joining us,
Your nanny.
Yeah, you remember that?
I don't know how I feel about the other one that we're talking about, users or meat.
Did you see Spencer just said switching to meat and electronics today?
Yeah, I don't know about that. That's HR might be calling me later.
Yeah, gosh, I'm already looking. Users, end users. It seems like we're getting friendly, right? But nobody's calling them people, Chris. They're not quite people. By the way, for any of you who volunteered, and I saw some earlier, ID10T does indeed redirect to the user error Wikipedia page. I did the research for you. I wasn't aware there was so many different flavors of whether it's PEBCAC, PEBMAC, or picnic. I'd never heard problem in chair, not in computer. So again, skill issue. These are some good ones. And Chris, my favorite, especially, I remember getting my Net Plus. I think I landed that in like 2004, 2005, learning about the OSI model. My favorite was always layer 8 in the OSI model here. So appreciate everybody, even those, issuing some restraint. Jesse, I saw your layer 8 issues. So you can tell, like, it seems like this topic is well resonating with our audience. And so, we kept looking. And by the way, Chris, 21 days ago, was looking for some feedback. He went out there to MSP Reddit. And for those of you not in the MSP world, it is an amazing community, just full of great technicians solving the problems for the world's maybe most challenging customer base, usually small businesses, but sometimes mid-market enterprises. And where I'm going with this is... thing that kills me is we asked the question, what is your biggest challenge? And the audience spoke. It went from users to users to users to clients taking security threat serious. It's a big challenge. To more clients are my biggest challenge. End users, easily end users. Google warriors telling us how to do our job. Human beings, humans, always the client, users. Fuck. And you get the point, right? Users. And thank you all for participating with us on Reddit, because we didn't realize, like, we had joked, we're techies as well. We've always been in here. I thought maybe this had changed a little bit. It turns out this is what happens when you go into founder mode and you start worrying about like annual operating plans instead of answering help desk tickets, that some stuff hasn't changed in 25 years, probably longer. So thank you for the playing. And so we started really diving into this, not just from our security awareness training product, but we've really started focusing as a business. Like, we know we're doing our job right when we can either automate, take away the pain points, or in some places prevent users from just, foot gunning themselves, shooting themselves in the foot. And so when I was looking for the sentiment, I could tell the sentiment was negative, but I was really trying to find like financial driven data to support to my board that this is like not just customers who are feeling this, not just partners who are feeling this, but there's a huge gap. And so as I was working and talking this to my board, which again, sometimes you got to make dollars and cents, I used when KnowBe4 was public, and they were only public for like 3 years, right? They got bought. I think Vista Equity pulled them back private. But what's wild is Vista and KnowBe4, right? They had grown from $170 million a year they were making to $310 million a year during that roughly 2-year and change period they were public. And so I started asking myself, like, okay, if this is what's happening, and sorry, losing my shit over here at people talking about screw loose behind the keyboard. I got to stop looking at the chat that's going on and not getting trolled. Going back to my point, if we're really making money on this stuff, are we truly improving end users? And oddly enough, during this exact same time frame, FBI and the Internet Crime Complaint Center released 2 amazing statistics that effectively says not only is business email compromise going and growing through the roof, human preventable incidents are not slowing down. They're actually the opposite. That kind of suggests all the tech that we are rolling out to be able to drive like humans are the first layer of defense is probably not working. I followed up on more recent statistics. It hasn't changed. We've seen some changes to Microsoft, like limiting like can macros run in certain contexts, disabling VB scripting engine type capabilities have made some of the phishing style tactics go down. But when you look at the broader theme of human preventable incidents, whether it's someone sliding into their DMs with shady stuff, not just their email, people doing like SMS, smishing, or, some of the vishing type, techniques, generally speaking, social engineering is just taking forms and shape differently, and we're not making a bigger difference. So yeah, trying to get the meat to quick clicking the electronics is a real hurdle. So Chris, I threw this out there and I tried to gather some good examples of meat making mistakes, people, users, end users making mistakes. And the most common one I found in Huntress across all endpoint, it turns out, there's a lot of scams, there's a lot of adware, there's a lot of getting pwned. But one thing that it didn't matter of whether I went back 4 days ago, 4 months ago, or 4 years ago, it seems like if you run QuickBooks or anybody in your organization run QuickBooks, let alone a CPA entity where everybody runs QuickBooks, whether on the desktop or in the cloud, every day of the week, we are running into cases where people are still falling for fake or free versions of QuickBooks. And this is just that good example of like, you could say you limited end users, but what I noticed, Chris, is in the malware on the endpoints themselves, they've stopped installing themselves to like program files and needing admin rights. And now they're living in their actual user profile. The apps only run as the context of that end user. And most of the time they do one of 2 things. This particular case here, sadly enough, that was rejected by the IT team. The IT team got duped as well, thinking this was legit QuickBooks. This was a case that not only would it give a pop-up to install more other shady stuff, it had an info stealer installed on it. So you can imagine any password they had saved to their browser, immediately dumped. Any of those type of like quick, easy tokens, like, hey, I have RDP files that allow me to authenticate to other, for instance, remote desktop servers. They were harvesting those. It's just kind of rough. And so I am somewhat interested to get some feedback from this audience, especially because everybody's been like so chatty. When you're thinking of human preventable incidents, like what are you seeing most often in your IT departments? Because like I can look through our data and we found plenty of other cases, by the way, adware, of course, people doing the phishing pages, giving up their creds. But I'm super, okay, Marsha's already dropping. Is that free PDF editors? I didn't even know those were still a thing now, but yeah, I guess they are. Like if you don't want to pay, I just assume with some of the tools in the operating systems getting a little bit more friendly, we'd see the end of like PDF Maker Pro 2021 or whatever. What else are we seeing out there, Chris? And I know on your end, I've got a whole bunch of example data. Okay. this is something related to you. For those that don't know, Chris not only is our CTO, he runs the innovation cell. So Darren, who brought up those browser plugins, we're actually looking and saying, oh crap, not only do we need apps in Entra or apps in Google Workspace, obviously we're in the user space in kernel on the endpoints. We're having to ask, do we need essentially a browser plugin to chase the other browser plugins right now? It is very clear that the browser, especially as we move to more and more, SaaS apps and, kind of this mid-market companies and below moving everything to the cloud. Yeah, it looks real.
Yep. We got removing the Microsoft News and Interests pop-up. God, I hate that thing. Fake file converters, secure DNS, VPNs. Man, those are hot. I mean, all of these are coming because like the next evolution that we're seeing just continue to gain traction. Is like Kyle said, is these info stealers. What folks have realized is that more and more of a company's information, of a user's daily workflow, is moving to these third-party SaaS apps. It's moving to the cloud, right? It's Google Docs, it's OneDrive, it's Microsoft 365. And so what they want is to just get on your machine so that they can steal those tokens, and then they can log into any of these applications as you, and that gives them access to all the company's data. And that's where all of this stuff is starting to go, which is why, we'll get into it here in a little bit, but we think that identity security posture management is kind of the next big thing.
Yeah, and you see David here talking, these are humans behaving like humans. By the way, we have this, I'll give a sneak preview. You know how there's like the Pareto's law, there's Murphy's law. We're going to preview Chris Bisnet's law that we're playing here in just a little bit, David. But yeah, some of this stuff, it really does feel like it's not preventable. Mark right above that called out like, look, know before is not like, there's real charlatans out there, real vendors that blow smoke. I'm not going to judge. This is not the time to, say what know before is or isn't doing. But we have seen in general data that suggests that doesn't matter who, if you cannot tell a story or drive awareness in a way that actually uses analogies, in a way that can relate to things that the end user, the most non-technical end user who generally just doesn't care, you're not going to change behavior. And so I'm there with you, Mark. And I even think I'm somewhat critical of even what we're doing at Huntress. I'll end this episode with a little bit of call to action. And really, I'm kind of looking, when I'm up on my soapbox to figure out if like you all cheer me on or say like, get the F down from that soapbox, this isn't an issue, but I'm right there. I'm right there with where the audience is doing. I'll tell you, some of the stuff, by the way, is not just the end users. Some of the most damaging cases we're seeing of error between keyboard and chair is usually like really good, really kind, but more junior IT practitioners that sometimes just don't know the difference. So like this is a case just like within this week that we've run through. And so like I use Screen Connect. It's a great tool, right? I understand that. But sometimes we actually report incidents where like this was within a school and we actually came through and said like, even though you're using two great products here, like we see this threat actor has installed a rogue version of Screen Connect. And what's important is notice it's in the users downloads directory and then the domains that are being used, the IPs they were calling to, and more importantly, the management site for where Screen Connect calls back to. You can see the download doesn't call back to the management site and it didn't match any of the other Screen Connects within that environment. Yet this was actually an incident that was wholeheartedly rejected, not by the end user. Like, yes, the end user did fall for the scam, but it's actually the IT department that said nope. And they responded back, we use Screen Connect. This is allowed. So like, let's not, pick on everybody so much. Cause to be very frank, like mistakes happen, right? It does happen. You got to give some forgiveness, but this is a good example of like, this thing was a little bit of like nightmare fuel for that organization when they realized what had happened. And so I'm curious, we don't have to spend a lot of time here, but does anybody have your own, like what internal mistakes create your most potent nightmare fuel? We don't play a lot in the application allow listing space. We are heavily looking at it for like endpoint security posture management. And it turns out one of the number one things I've talked to, like usually they're either IT directors or the actual like service manager. And they're like, look, when we started rolling out allow listing, one of our biggest things is before, when an end user ran an app and got pwned, whether it was ransomware or some sort of like implant or, remote access tool, they were the one that was at the fault. But now when I have this allow listing product and my IT director now, or my IT technician, whether it be tier 1, tier 2, whatever, approves an app to run, I'm now sometimes taking on that liability. I'm allowing the one that allowed the ransomware to run or allowed Screen Connect to run. And so for me, this is one of those scenarios of like, social, engineering can be really, really dangerous. And depending what we're doing, we could be like taking on some of the onus now, being attacked as the IT department. So I'm seeing folks, jumping down of, let's lock down the elevation of software. There's all kinds of stuff. I think Auto Elevate was a tool that CyberFox bought. I think ThreatLocker has maybe a privilege access management tool they're doing. I know a lot of people do have them. So
Intune has one as well.
Does it? I didn't even know. I mean, we use Intune internally across both our, Macs, Linux, and Windows boxes. But okay. Well, I appreciate everybody sharing this stuff, because no joke, like we are, if you can't tell, security posture management, like we're really, really good at detection and response. We are looking at security posture management through all the different angles, and we're trying to get this. So I want to make a plea about the future of user-based defense. So if Murphy's Law says anything that can go wrong will go wrong, and I think that's something we saw earlier of saying users being users, Murphy's Law relates. Pareto's Law, Pareto's principle, that's the 80-20 rule. 20% or 80% of the outcomes come from 20% of the causes. That's probably like 80% of the outages come from 20% of your most dangerous end users. That's probably a version of that. Chris and I have been playing with this kind of like equal and opposite reaction type law and business law that we're playing with. And you're the first to be able to see something like this is like, look, every layer of security demands an equal and opposite path of least resistance. What we're talking about is you can harden your endpoints, harden your identities, harden your data, harden your network traffic to the extreme and make the network completely unusable. But in a world that requires productivity, you have to open up and require gaps. And so internally at Huntress, we've been looking at domains, and I'll stop some screen sharing just for a second to talk to you. We've been trying to figure out like, what are all the domains we can protect? And are humans one of the layers we can protect? With this business law idea that we're playing with, and we're not going to go publish this, it's just something that we're trying to treat as like a truthism. We're realizing that domains are probably all the things you can apply apps and harden. And that might only be 50% of the puzzle. We're really considering that the reason that since the 70s of IBM technicians joking about PEBCAC all the way till today of people lighting up Chris's Reddit thread, maybe the reason we're so disappointed with end users is because maybe they should be doing more, and the opportunity for them to do more is real. We're disappointed because like for all the stuff that we can harden and lock down, as long as we want to allow productivity, those end users are going to have to play a role in this. And so I'm curious. I mean, this isn't an epiphany. It's something we're working through, but we're having to realize like at Huntress, oh gosh, maybe some of the most advantageous thing we can do is, we can build products for all the different domains, fancy SIMs, ITDRs, EDRs, whatever. But maybe half the problem could be just users not knowing tradecraft, not caring about tradecraft. And let's be real, we don't want to, as businesses, we can't put people through like 2 hours of learning per month to be able to it just doesn't work that way. That's not how it works. So Chris, do you got any commentary on this? Because I know, again, we used a little bit of your thought process. We used a lot of bit of ChatGPT this morning to make that nice and succinct. How are you feeling about this thought?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, the more security you make it, the less usable it is, right? So you got to find that happy medium. You got to figure out how to take away the sharp edges so that people don't cut themselves. And if you make it easy for them to do the right thing, do the right thing. If you make it hard for them to do the right thing, they're going to do the wrong thing that's easy.
So I'm feeling it. I'm feeling it. I'm feeling it. So, Chris, this is my first soapbox. And again, it's not going to be long. It's going to be very, very succinct. But I'm looking for, like, when I'm asking for feedback, it's not just cute, like, drama or for the sake of this. I actually need to know if I'm wrong. Because if I am wrong, I'm going to, like, direct with my program manager, right? My product manager for security awareness training. We're going to go in the wrong direction. So you're going to see some early inside scoop of what we're going to try to change. But let's start with what I understand the landscape to be and maybe get some feedback. So my hypothesis is the existing approach to awareness training, really elevating humans, minimizing, or maximizing human risk management, minimizing human threats, meat threats, um, is probably not optimal. I'm not saying it's not perfect, or I'm sorry, I'm not saying it's not effective. I'm just saying it's not optimal. And so from my understanding, from all the feedback that I've got, is I believe SAT or security awareness training landscape, from no matter who the vendor, kick-ass vendors like Finn, more mediocre vendors that just really are like a reselling, you get a once per month awareness training video. And maybe if somebody messes up, maybe some products have like micro trainings, like, oh, you don't fill out this phishing page. Let me give you the 1-minute version. And unfortunately, like, when you do an awareness training video, almost never are your email-based phishing simulations related to what you learned. So there's not really like a reinforcement loop that's happening here. If any of you are seeing that differently, where you're like, no, every month my training and awareness videos relate to that, like, I'd love to learn from it. Like, there's nothing wrong with being a second mover. And if somebody's truly innovating, like, I want to be able to bring that to you all as our customer and partner base. And the stuff that I'm getting with is, I'm also a little bit annoyed that why is it only email-based phishing when today there is so many different types of social engineering that goes down. From what I can tell, the people that are buying the products like awareness training, they see awareness training as kind of important. But the more I've asked people, they're like, I'm largely checking a box and really trying to limit my liability, because kind of like the feedback you've already given, I'm using it, but I don't really see like stark behavioral differences. And it doesn't matter which product I've asked this about. Again, it's not about putting others down. It's about trying to like move the industry. And so I'm really curious, are these hitting home? I've got like 1 or 2 more bullets, but I wasn't making time to look at chat as I realized I'm distracted like by squirrels. Yeah, people just want convenience, right? In its most simplistic form, which is just, rallying against anything security related. Click on link for training about not clicking on links. That is ironic as hell, Eric. I have a problem with that, by the way, and you'll see me here in just a second. I appreciate folks just being direct. Like, there is real, like, I have auditors, like the most boring stuff I have to do is like audits on our financials, especially as we prepare for like this. We want to be this independent public company that can't be brought back private by private equity or bought out or whatever. We want to stay as independent just forever. That's why I'm here, not going anywhere. But sometimes we have to check the box with these audits. So I appreciate people just being vulnerable about like, yo, we just have to sometimes appease auditors. And yeah, I agree, by the way, Corey, like spending 8 to 10 minutes watching videos, like, I'm busy as hell already. I mean, we have a once a year sexual harassment training, and it's like the best of sexual harassment trainings I've ever done. I think it's a company called Easy Llama, but it is not good. Like, it's not great, but it's the best I've ever seen.
Yeah, and it depends on where you live. Like, people in California it has to be 90 minutes long. So like there's no way to skip forward or any of that kind of stuff. It's a lot.
And so from what I can tell, team, it looks like management, generally speaking, all your stuff, whether it's your awareness video plus your phishing trainings, anything else, if it is more than $15 15 minutes per month, I am not going to allow a human to spend that time. I need them to be productive. And I've heard versions that are larger than this, and I've heard versions that are much smaller than this. So it's kind of like a big average. But am I maybe just asking, like, does this kind of match, if you could call it, like, center mass of what, security awareness training looks like today? Okay. Huge thank you. Huge thank you for folks that are just giving me this heads up of, okay, I'm not too far off. And if I am, please light me up. So here's some of my pitch. Does anybody remember when like antivirus was the quadrant du jour? Like that was kind of for like the enterprise, that was 2008, 2009. Antivirus was still kind of the known quadrant all the way to like 2015 in the SMB space too. But what happens is we eventually realized this static signature, non-internet connected antivirus wasn't cutting it. And we matured. We pivoted, and now like EDR, both preventive, being behavioral based, using the cloud plus on, endpoint detections. And then we also became realistic. Like sometimes people get past prevention, but finding things early and responding to them is a lot better than like waiting till it's stage 4 cancer and then dying. So my pitch that I want to test with you all is I think it's time for the security awareness quadrant. And I don't care what this actual acronym is. Right now, a lot of enterprises using security posture management, like cloud security posture management, identity security posture management. My question is, does the change from AV to EDR need to happen? I don't care if we call it human risk management, if we call it cyber resilience, whatever the marketers come up with, we'll follow. But that's my pitch, is I think now is the time. And I want to share with you what I think the vision needs to look like. So first and foremost, I'm really salty about this. Like, if you can't drive real excitement, whether it's through like I think about Duolingo as a pretty good example of an app that, man, that thing is viral as hell, whether it's through badges, apps, etc., streaks, leaderboards, like it really motivates people to actually want to do it. And it brings some competitive edge. The reason I also like it is it doesn't make you feel like a dumbass because you can't remember, Privyet is a Russian word, or what Russian word it actually is, right? More importantly, I've even seen some of my own like MSP partners that talk about like, look, some of the companies we support actually fire people for failing training. Like, I don't think that's the right way you motivate somebody. Like, negative reinforcement is a thing, but from what I can tell, that's not the way you get adoption to start using these people to protect those gaps of where you can't harden on whether identity, endpoint, network, data. The next part I want to say is I think all monthly training needs to tie into tradecraft simulations. And notice I use that word tradecraft simulation. What I'm talking about is like, if I have an episode that now tells me here's phishing simulation and here's maybe how someone can slide into my DMs, why am I sending a real email to their real inbox, browsing to a real website? Like NASA, when they shoot off like rockets, or ESA, if you're in Europe joining us or whatever, when you're shooting rockets or landers, you only shoot the real one. Everything else is in a proving ground, a simulated world. And I believe we need to not only do monthly training that ties to these simulations that probably aren't in real systems, but really expand into other things. Like, for instance, what if our human security posture management actually said, like, when we talk to people about like 2-factor exhaustion, maybe we give them a scenario. You have 3 minutes to be able to go through. Here's the scenarios that are popping up. You have to quickly choose through points on which 2-factor authentication in this, call it a game, call it a simulation, is allowed and not. And I'm not talking about stuff that always relates to you. If somebody's a mechanic turning wrenches, they should be able to think through the tradecraft. Jill in HR just received this, 2-factor login to be able to get into the, employee feedback system. Do you approve it or not? Yes, that makes sense. Jill in HR just got 9 in a row at night saying this type of stuff. That should be the type of scenario. And for email, I want to see things. If any of you have kiddos or little ones, maybe nieces and nephews that are like learning to code for the first time, why are we doing simulations that when we teach them tradecraft, why can't they do mini games, for instance, where they just learned about phishing? Why doesn't it drop into like Dee Dee's little environment where she gets to create her own simulations, and the end user maybe drag and drops? I want to make the subject line this. I want to be able to use words that look like this. I want to be able to make my email look similar in this domain. Why can't we teach them the offensive side just as much as defense, but with training shoes, baby shoes? Keeping that going, as you heard me, beyond email, like, why are we okay with only doing email simulations? And there's even some regulation in some states that say you must do quarterly email-based simulations. Why? Like, that's so narrow and myopic. Why are we not challenging this stuff? Where is, like, can anybody think of a product that simulates like an Instagram or a TikTok DM that comes in and scams you, or simulates an insider threat that's already in your Teams or in your Slack that's coming in there saying, hey, I'm so and so, I need you to add a new phone device? But what it really is someone logged into your Teams, is social engineering IT from internally and about to get past two-factor when you add that device. And keeping it going, I think the more important part is, why can't we increase more appetite by delivering like more measurable? Like, if you move all these systems into technology, you don't have to worry about, did the phishing email actually get delivered? You don't have to worry about, did Chrome block that browser because it's a known browser extension and they just get or a browser, phishing website. Now they just get the red, URL, or the email was delivered, but now something like, what is that called? Avanon or whatever came in and behind it and ripped the email out. Why can't we deliver stuff that's all simulation based on this end, not only to be able to go beyond email, but get better ideas of where they're clicking, what they're doing, what they're filling out, and actually get closer to like, when I learned this training and I failed this training, now I put them through a simulation maybe 15 days later to be able to measure efficacy. So this is the stuff that I'm throwing out here. And I'm wondering, do you all think I'm off my rocker? So I'm going to take a second to breathe. I obviously am passionate about this idea, but my bigger thought that I'm trying to test here with the community is, am I barking up the right tree? Am I fucking crazy? Because not everybody sees the same way I do. I understand that. I'm just wondering, for this group, if this was at the same cost, same product, and this is what you were getting, would this help improve, assuming that the simulations aren't corny, that they actually reinforce, they can't be such a thing that looks so silly that it's fake. And we're even thinking of ideas like, what if we still had the integration to your email so we could pull in like subject lines, but they show up in the simulation, or things along those lines? The text messages as they're being simulated might actually still look like they're from people in your environment, but they're powering, this app-based simulator. Okay.
Yeah, I
So
mean,
I
we
got
got a couple of people agreeing with you. A couple of people saying like, yeah, they're just looking for compliance, checking a box. People generally like the idea of scoring and gamification, so that's cool.
Okay. I'm definitely getting stuff. So I appreciate everybody. Like, and if you got any things that you're like, where you think this might fall apart, like, I know some like founders and stuff believe like, don't share your idea because other vendors might copy it. Like, the most flattering thing that could happen is other vendors start improving security posture for humans. So like, I'm not worried about that at all. And at the same time, if you all start finding holes in our ideas, like, it's just going to help us deliver a better product. So, all right, Chris, I think, I mean, I see more and more folks. And by the way, we tried to do like SMS text simulations in real life. Turns out that's against like most telco laws. And then delivering texts, like, how do we deliver text to our customers and partners in Australia, plus the US, plus wherever? Like, it just got really nasty. Like, we were looking at having to build, like, how like Pokemon Go farmers have that like array of phones that just mine for like golden items and stuff. We were looking like, do we have to build an array of phones? Because all the other things like Twilio were banning us for breaking laws. So anyway, this is good. Oh man, Ryan talking about WhatsApp. And the way we're thinking about this is, imagine your simulation, if it could be built on like a skinnable interface. So today's simulation might be WhatsApp. Tomorrow's simulation is probably the same tech, but it could look like TikTok, or it could look like an SMS. They really are just bi-directional real-time chat. So like, I think we could get really creative bringing this into the curricula DD world, where like all the fun, silly stuff of like how we mimic brands could play into that. So I appreciate folks giving that feedback. Chris, I know you were looking for some real quick feedback on the identity side of this and sharing a little bit. Do you mind if I screen share real quick and you kind of walk through your piece too? And then we'll wrap this up because we're getting real close to being at the top of the hour. All right, homie, here you go.
All right. So we talked about, HSPM or something like that, which is really about training users. Identity security posture management, or ISPM, is really about monitoring and analyzing where are all the places people are authenticating, what are their access rights, what are all the things that they're using. So for that, we're we're considering this. We've looked at this. We'll likely go in this direction, but some of the things that we're looking to understand as part of building a product and building a solution around this are like, what systems are users authenticating with? How are they authenticating? Are they just using a password? Do they have single sign-on? Do they have MFA on? Nothing, right? Which users are administrators in those machines or in those systems? And are there any patterns of failures, right? Like, are people brute forcing some of these things, where maybe they weren't yesterday, but today they start to, right? Or, cases where they were able to successfully log in, but MFA is blocking them repeatedly in a small, window of time. Somebody's trying to exhaust the user and get them to approve the MFA, even though it's not really them. So these are some of the things we're looking at. One of the challenges with this is that a lot of SaaS applications don't have good audit and logging functionality. So getting this data is hard. It's getting better. More applications are getting integrations with SIM, where they're able to send logs and send things places, and that's good, right? It's better, move in the right direction. But there's still other things there. Like, say we detect something is bad and we need to lock out a user account. Does the API support that? Maybe, maybe not. I can tell you, just being transparent, the Huntress API doesn't support that. We don't support user management through the API yet. So, that's a thing that we got to improve too. And it's really as an industry, it's got to start to become standard table stakes expectation, just kind of like the way that like MFA is. So with that, wanted to give you a little peek behind the scenes into some new stuff that we are working on. So we've been taking the SIM data, and people asked, and we talked a little bit about at the top of the show about detections from SIM data. And so one of the things that we are working on first is what we call auth insights. And there's a number of things to this, but it's really about tracking who's logging in, where are they logging in, was the attempt to authenticate successful or not, for a system? Was it local or remote? Where are the patterns coming from? Are they all coming from one IP address? Are they coming from many IP addresses? All of these things, we're looking to be able to slice the data to find bad stuff. So the first thing what we've started with here is really tracking RDP authentications. So you can see here in the column on the left, we have a bunch of users. We're not really sure how somebody was trying to authenticate over RDP using an @gmail.com address. But hey, maybe it'll work. But that's an interesting one, right? Because they've got 15 failures and 0 successes. So, clearly somebody's trying to do something there. But if you look at line 3, this one's maybe more scary, right? Because we've got 11 failures and 1 success. Does that mean that they tried, 12 passwords and the last one worked? I don't know, but these are the things that we are starting to tease apart. We are pulling the data in, and this is where we're going to try to go.
So, Chris, I know you mentioned earlier, like, we have some of these things working on the back end. It's the how do we not inundate you with all kinds of garbage, right? The thing Huntress has always been notable for is, I know that if I send you something that's low confidence or even worse, wrong, I'm creating you more work. And so one of the pieces that we're working through some of these is, we realized it's easy when we know the answer, we can dismiss it. And when we know it's malicious, we can report it. What we're trying to work through is this new workflow called escalations. That's the, like, we can't possibly have enough info or research and find enough info to make the decision. How do we escalate a thing to you? And the one part we're most worried about and are starting to look at, like, batching and other smart ways to do this, is we don't want to send you 93 escalations a day. We're actually improving this right now on the identity detection and response side of the house right now, where I'll be darned, like, as soon as you start looking at where people are using VPNs and actually logging in from, it blows your mind. But we realize it's a form of creating you more work. So for those of you who are hungry and, picking on some of these things, we're really trying to find cases where they're wrecking. And if none of you actually spend the time, to pull anything away from this session, I want to give you one piece of advice on where you can learn about tradecraft. And just for, maybe by, a sign of hands or a sign of comments, does anybody use DFIR report? DFIR report is essentially a free resource where great security analysts come out there and they share what are the most common tradecraft impacting different companies. And what's wild is they actually break down each of these cases. So I haven't looked at any recently, like meaning in the last like 2 or 3 reports. But usually if you come in here and just search for keywords, whether it's RDP or login, you'll see some of these things of like, oh, they were using an account login, right? Or an auto login using WinLogin, forcing reboots. And as we started analyzing our data versus other things, like for instance, DFIR report and other trends, we really think this RDP focused tradecraft is probably one of the biggest things we can give you from your endpoint event logs right away. So Chris, I mean, have you thought about how you're going to get people into trialing this? Are you going to do a public beta for this one?
Yeah, probably, because we'll want the feedback to understand cases where we are, correct, and cases where we are wrong, things that we have missed that in theory we should have detected. So yeah, definitely getting people in so we can get some of that feedback and just try to figure out how do we continue to build it out and tune the system will be important.
Chris, if we have any like SIM partners or customers on the sucker right now, how in the world can they like get a part of that? Because I know you're playing with this like now. Like it's not like just a thing that's in theory. Like this is right now. I mean, you took the screenshot this morning with data from this morning.
Right. We're still a little early. We only just turned this on yesterday afternoon. So like this is real hot off the presses. There's no UI or anything for this yet. So we still gotta like bake it out a little bit, but we wanted to start being able to see the data so that we could figure out what we were getting and what we weren't and go from there. So
Chris,
we
do you want to
will
mention that? I mean, I know you got another follow-on slide, but Ryan mentioned like just the problem of like when users get locked out, or more importantly, like not more importantly, equally importantly, when somebody just has a bunch of failed logon attempts. That's been a really high thing that people have asked for. Any thoughts on like how we're going to handle it? Because I know, before we get to our big sexy call to action, this is something like you're literally looking at as, with the team, not just RDP logins, but what about failed logins, brute forcing? Brute forcing is very different than I just had 3 logins because I forgot my password.
Yeah. I mean, some of these will generate incident reports, and like I said at the top of the show, we've done some of that in some cases already where we were able to identify a malicious actor or a likely malicious actor connecting to RDP remotely. And those are great for incident reports, right? It's something bad, you need to take care of it. But then there are other things where it's maybe at the level of an incident report, but we're not really sure. And for those, we'll send escalations to just say, hey, this is the thing we saw. We suddenly saw a bunch of failed authentications for this user or to this machine, right? We've never seen failed RDP authentications to this machine, and maybe we're seeing them from remote IP addresses. Maybe somebody just made a configuration change, and now this machine is available to the internet, right? And so, like, those are the types of things that we'll send an escalation for, to just say, hey, here's a thing that we found. How should we proceed? And if the result that we get back or the response that we get back is, hey, no, this looks bad, generate an incident report. We totally will, and we'll send it out. But the alternate could be, hey, no, this is okay. This is just us testing, or this was just this user trying to log in and we got it, right? And, that's still valuable too, even though it's not an incident report.
All right, Chris. So, I mean, obviously some of the things that we had in here, and I just want to be cognizant, we're right at the top of the time. Team was asking, like, do we have a feature that allows configuration of notifications, escalations, etc.? I'll tell you, it's something we're looking at. We think it might need to be something like, give me the fire hose, give me it in, maybe call it 4-hour batches, give me in 1-day batches, something like that. But it's something we're really, really considering. If you have good ideas on what that should look like, or other technologies that similarly relate, we try to look for other proven examples. We don't always know everything. And so if you have those, I'm just going to, with a big call to action, like please, if you're not using the upvoting and the new feature creation and feedback.huntress.com, like do it. We do giveaways, all kinds of other fun stuff along those lines. So like this really helps when we get community participation. And so we like this, but we're trying to work through what is the right level. With that said, Chris, do you have any giveaway for this team for everybody who made it the full hour?
Yep. So I picked 2. Today's winners are Drew D and Scott B.
You just have a thing for D last names? I'm
Yeah,
Kyle D.
I don't know. I guess so. Yeah, I don't know. So if all you got to do to collect your giveaway is email swag@huntress.com, and we'll collect your info for where we need to ship the stuff, and we'll get it out to you.
And just to clarify, was that Scott D or Scott B?
B with a B.
Oh, see, I misspeaking. I thought you were just going with people with. All right, we're not going to make inappropriate jokes. On that note, everybody, huge thanks for joining us for Product Lab. If you can't tell, like this feedback truly moves the needle for all of us. I would just highly encourage, please, if you're seeing SAT this way, we're going to have some like snippets. I think maybe we're going to try to get some comments. We'd love to hear from you. Please share them online and bring more people into Product Lab. The more voices, usually the merrier.
Yep. Cool.
All right. I'm out of here. Not biting on that John K.
See y'all.